The sky above the arena burned with twin suns pouring golden heat over the domed structure, where creatures from across the stars gathered to witness. Blood and glory, the crowd buzzed with excitement, waiting for the first trial to begin. Warriors from distant worlds had come to prove their strength and win the title of Prime Hunter, a title older than memory itself, a tradition rooted in combat and survival. In the upper chamber of the arena stood Thera, tall and armored, a battle-scarred warrior. From the Ravs species, her skin marked with the symbols of victory, her eyes sharp like a predator watching the field below where the challengers prepared for the trials. She had seen many fighters rise and fall, many champions crowned and forgotten. But this time something felt different. A new name had appeared on the list of competitors, a species rarely seen in such contests, a human named Cade, not born among stars, but on a distant planet known for storms, deserts, and forests, a world that produced survivors, not soldiers. The other spectators laughed when his name was announced, believing it to be a joke, a weak species thrown in for entertainment. But Thera did not laugh, she observed. She waited. Cade entered the arena with calm steps. No flashy armor, no advanced weapons, only a simple blade strapped to his back and a thin shield attached to his left arm. His movements quiet, his face unreadable, not the posture of a performer, but of a man who had fought before, who had lost before, who had won before. The first challenger stepped forward, a creature from the mountain moons of Dravuk, 4 arms, thick with muscle, skin made of dense, stone-like plates, and eyes that glowed red with heat. This beast had crushed 10 opponents in the year. Past, its roar echoed across the arena walls, sending smaller spectators into silence. Cade did not flinch. He walked slowly to the center of the arena, eyes fixed on his opponent, his shield raised not high, just enough to catch the angle of attack. His right hand rested on the hilt of his blade, breathing steady, chest rising with control, not fear. The beast charged forward with wild force, arms swinging like giant hammers, claws ready to tear flesh and break bone. The crowd rose to their feet, expecting a quick end, expecting Cade to be thrown across the sand and broken into pieces. But something unexpected happened. Cade moved with perfect timing, his body low and fast, sliding beneath the first strike, deflecting the second with a turn of his shield before rising with his blade, cutting across the back of the creature's leg, not to kill, but to slow and weaken. Beast stumbled, turning with fury, its massive fists smashing into the ground where Cade had stood only moments ago. Dust filled the air, but Cade was already behind him, landing another strike along the creature's side again. Not fatal, but precise, weakening tendons disrupting movement. Thera leaned forward in her seat, eyes focused, breath slow. She had seen warriors with strength, she had seen fighters with speed, but this human was something else. Not the fastest, not the strongest, but his every move had purpose, every step had meaning. He read his enemy like an open book and answered with cold strategy. The creature growled, spinning with desperation, launching a flurry of blows, but Cade waited, shield up, footwork tight, using the weight of his enemy against him, letting the strikes glance off his shield, then striking again, blade meeting flesh in a quiet rhythm. Not flashy, not wild, only clean, only sharp. And then it ended. The beast fell to one knee, blood running from deep cuts. Breathing hard, unable to continue, Cade stood in front of him, not moving, not finishing the kill, just waiting, blade lowered as if he knew the fight was over before it had begun. The arena fell silent. No cheers, no claps, only the sound of wind brushing across the high walls, and the slow retreat of the wounded. Champion Thera sat back in her seat, words forming in her mind. Spoken only, felt something deep and primal rising in her memory of ancient times, when strength meant survival, and only the worthy passed on there. Blood, the human, left the arena walking with the same calm steps, his body marked with dust and sweat. But no sign of injury, no sign of weakness. The announcer called his name again, this time with respect, this time with weight. The crowd still unsure of what they had seen. Some whispered it was luck, some said it was cleverness, but Thera knew it was More than that, this was not just skill, this was instinct. This was legacy in motion, and as Cade disappeared into the corridor behind the arena walls, Thura looked toward the sky, thinking of old stories, thinking of survival, thinking of bloodlines. And destiny. She did not smile, she only watched and waited for his next fight. Whispers filled the corridors behind the arena, thick with dust and tension, as fighters and watchers moved aside whenever Cade passed them, avoided his gaze. Others watched him with curiosity, trying to understand how a simple human could defeat one of the arena's favorite monsters without panic, without hesitation, without fear. Cade did not speak much. He cleaned his blade with cloth soaked in herbs. He checked the edge, tested the grip, tightened the straps of his worn armor, every action slow and practiced, not rushed, not lazy, only controlled, like he had done this many times before. Maybe not here, maybe not under alien suns, but somewhere long ago where survival came not from luck but from instinct and will. The next match was announced. Challengers selected from the outer planets, where cold winds carved the bones of those too weak to last. These were twins from the ice colonies, tall and pale, with armor made of bone and steel, weapons curved like claws and movement like wind, fast, cold, brutal. Cade stood when his name was called. No show, no celebration. He walked to the gate of the arena with quiet steps, head lowered, eyes calm. The crowd louder than before. Some cheered, some doubted, but all waited to see if the first win was a mistake or a warning. Thyra sat in her place again, armor polished, eyes burning with curiosity and something deeper, something old. Her fingers rested on the hilt of her blade, a gesture of thought, not of threat. Her thoughts ran fast, remembering ancient stories told in the battle halls of her people, about warriors who moved like shadows, who fought with hearts like fire, who lived and died with honor so deep that their enemies built statues in their name. She wondered if this human came from such a bloodline, or if his kind had changed without warning into something new, something dangerous. The gate opened, and Cade entered the arena. His shoulders relaxed, his hand near his blade. The sun above cast long shadows across the sand. The twins, already in place, moved together like one, their eyes locked on their prey, ready to test their speed against his focus, their sharpness against his silence. The horn sounded. No time to wait, no time to think. The twins moved in a spinning rush, one from the left, the other from the right, a pattern designed to trap, to confuse, to overwhelm. But Cade did not panic. His body turned just enough to block the first blow. Shield raised, blade drawn in one clean motion that cut through empty air, forcing the first twin to change direction. Second came low, fast, aiming for his legs with sharp steel curved like a crescent moon. Cade leaped back, light on his feet, sliding in the sand, then countered with a forward rush that pushed the attacker off balance. Not enough to finish, only enough to open space to read the next move. The twins regrouped, circling like predators. Cade breathed, slow, eyes watching not just them, but the wind, the light, the sand, the way their shoulders moved, the way their feet touched the ground. Every small detail mattered. Every mistake could cost him more than blood. They came again, faster, more aggressive, their weapons flashing in patterns meant to distract. One high, one low, one spinning from behind, one charging from the front. Cade dropped low, spinning on one knee, shield raised to block the strike from above, while his blade swept out behind, catching the leg of the one who tried to sneak from his blind side. A cry rang out, sharp and angry, as the twins stumbled, falling sideways into the sand. The second twin rushed in with fury, but Cade was already moving, stepping aside, letting the blade pass inches from his face, then smashing the hilt of his own weapon into the attacker's chest, knocking the wind from his lungs. The crowd roared louder, this time not in shock, but in awe. Thyra stood without knowing it, her breath caught between her teeth, her heart pounding, not from fear, but from something deeper, something like memory, something like pride. The twins were not finished. They rose again, blood on their armor, but no retreat in their eyes. They fought not for victory, but for respect. And Cade gave it to them. He nodded before The next round began a gesture of honor, one warrior to another. The final exchange came like a storm sand. Flying steel, clashing bodies moving too fast for the untrained eye to follow. Cade blocked, struck, dodged, turned, every action flowing into the next like water over stone, not perfect, but unstoppable in the end. Both twins fell, not broken, not dead, only defeated, lying in the sand. Breathing hard, bloodied, but alive, Cade stood over them. Blade lowered, offering no insult, only silence. The horn sounded again, victory given to the human who now had 2 wins, without armor, without power, without mercy. Cade turned away, walking back through the gate, as the crowd chanted his name. Not out of tradition, but out of real belief, the kind that rises only when something unexpected, something true, reveals itself. Thyra left her seat for the first time, walking slowly down the steps of the arena, her eyes never leaving the gate where Cade had vanished, her thoughts heavy with realization that this human was not just a fighter, not just a name on a list. He was something more. He was proof that strength comes not from size or weapon, but from something buried deep in the soul. A hunger that does not fade, a fire that does not die. And in her heart, she knew the old words spoken by the matriarchs of her people now lived again in her mind. Such a hunter must not be forgotten. Such a hunter must not vanish into history. Such a hunter must pass on what he carries. The trials were not yet over, but Thyra already knew this. Human had changed the story, and she would be the first to act on it. The sun had moved lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the walls of the arena, where silence followed the last battle. Even after the crowd had returned to their chambers, even after the dust had settled, something remained in the air, something heavy like the scent of thunder before a storm. Inside the fighter's resting zone, Cade sat alone, sharpening the edge of his blade with a slow, careful rhythm. His hands steady, his eyes unfocused, not looking at anything, but seeing everything. The walls were thick, the floor cold, the air filled with the scent of oil and iron. But Cade seemed untouched by it all, his mind somewhere deeper, somewhere beyond this place. Across the halls, Thyra walked with firm steps, her armor removed, her cloak trailing behind her like a shadow. Her breath calm, but her heart speaking a language older than memory, a language of instinct, a voice that said this moment could not be ignored. This meeting could not be delayed. She entered the chamber without knocking, standing near the doorway, watching Cade work. He did not look up, but his fingers paused for a moment, then continued without change, as if he had known she would. Come. Thyra moved closer, her boots silent, her voice clear and strong, her words not loud, but filled with purpose. You do not fight like the others, you do not move like them, or think like them. Where did you learn this? Cade looked up at last, his eyes sharp. Not cruel, not warm, only focused, his voice low and plain. Learned it by staying alive. Thyra tilted her head slightly, not mocking, not smiling, only observing like a hunter, studying something rare, something wild. You do not fight for glory, you do not shout when you win, you do not kneel when they cheer. What drives you? Cade stood, placing the blade back into its sheath, walking slowly toward the nearby wall, leaning his back against it, arms folded, gaze calm. Not here for their praise, not here for their titles, just here to prove something. Thyra moved closer now, only a few steps away, her eyes locked on his face, her hands resting near her side. No weapon, no threat, only presence, proved to who. Cade glanced up at the ceiling, then back at her. To myself, maybe to those who think humans are weak, maybe to those who forgot what it means to fight with purpose. Thyra studied his words, letting them settle in her mind. She had seen warriors who bragged about bloodlines, who screamed about honor and power. But Cade spoke none of that. His words were heavy, his silence heavier. She stepped even closer now, her voice low, her tone changed, less like a warrior, more like something ancient, something primal. In my world, we honor strength with legacy. We choose not only to remember the strong, but to carry their essence forward through blood, through memory, through union. Cade did not speak at once, only watched her. Expression only waited. She continued, her voice a whisper, now a breath between thoughts. When I first saw you, I saw a human. Now I see something else, something my ancestors would have knelt before, not out of fear, but out of deep respect. Cade unfolded his arms, standing straight, his eyes meeting hers, without pride, without doubt. And what does that mean to you? Thyra took one slow breath before answering. It means you carry something rare, something that should not end here, in this place, in this time. It means you must continue. It means you must pass it on. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, something unspoken moved between them, not desire, not affection, but recognition, like two ancient forces meeting under the same sky. Cade said nothing for a long time, then walked past her slowly toward the center of the room. He picked up a cloth and began cleaning the sand from his boots with small motions, focused and silent. Thyra turned, watching him from behind, her voice once again strong. There are 2 trials left. If you survive them, you will not be forgotten by the crowd. But if you fall without passing on your strength, you will be lost to time, like many before. Cade finished cleaning his boots, then turned toward her, his face calm, his words firm. Legacy means nothing if it is forced, it must be chosen. Thyra stepped forward again, her eyes bright with understanding. Then choose wisely. Human for the galaxy has already started watching. She turned and walked away, leaving him in silence again. Though the silence had changed, now it was not empty. Now it was full of meaning. Outside the arena, banners rose high in the wind, names of champions written in many tongues. Old names faded, new ones shining bright. But now one name burned hotter than the rest. Cade. The human, the hunter, the storm that came from a forgotten world and challenged everything known inside the chambers. Cade sat once more, his blade beside him, his thoughts heavy, not with fear, not with pride, only with the weight of what might come next. He remembered Earth, he remembered cold nights with no fire, long march across empty fields, broken bones, burned skin, hunger that felt endless. But still he had lived, still he had fought, still he had endured. Now, in this place under twin suns, with the eyes of warriors watching, and the voice of an alien warrior echoing in his mind, he prepared again, not just for battle, but for a choice that could shape more than himself, a choice that could reach beyond stars, beyond borders, into the bloodlines of a world not his own. He closed his eyes, breathed once, then waited for the call of the next trial. And somewhere, not far away, Thyra waited too. The 3rd trial began under a sky filled with dark clouds, moving fast across the horizon. The winds howled through the great arena, carrying dust and fragments of dry leaves, swirling in chaotic patterns. The watchers returned to their seats, their voices low, their eyes focused, no longer mocking, no longer doubtful. Cade stood near the edge of the battleground, his body wrapped in light armor, his blade resting against his back, his breath slow and deep. He had fought twice, he had bled, he had endured. But this was different. This was not just another fight. This was the test they had prepared for, the test that separated survivors from legends. Announcer's voice echoed through the arena, naming the next opponent. Not a creature, not a twin, not a beast from distant worlds, but a soldier of steel forged in laboratories, trained in artificial gravity. Born not from a mother, but from a chamber of war. They called it the Black Form, tall and wide, with limbs shaped for destruction, muscles, enhanced nerves wired to react faster than thought. A being designed only to kill, only to break, only to win. Cade listened without fear, without movement, without anger, his mind quiet like a calm sea, his fingers resting near the edge of his blade, waiting, not rushing. The gate opened, the black form entered its body, covered in armor fused into its skin, its eyes glowing red, its steps silent but heavy with threat. It did not roar, it did not boast, it only moved forward like a storm with no heart. The horn sounded, the trial began. Cade moved first, his legs driving him across the sand. Fast but not wild, smooth but not soft. His blade came out with a whisper, cutting through the air, as he aimed for the joint near the creature's shoulder, a point less protected. But the black form twisted with speed that no normal eye could follow, catching Cade's strike with its arm and countering with a strike toward his chest. A blow that could break bone and end breath. Cade rolled to the side, using the sand to slide under the swing, rising again near the creature's back, but even that space offered no safety as the enemy spun faster than expected, sending a kick that caught Cade across the ribs. He flew backward, landing hard, sliding through dust, but he rose again, one hand over his side, blood in his mouth, pain in his breath, but no weakness in his eyes. Crowd stood silent, watching the human who had never fallen before now face something beyond natural power, something built, not born. Thyra leaned forward, her hands clenched, her eyes locked on Cade, watching every movement, every step, every breath. She had seen this trial before, had seen many fall to the black form with broken spines and shattered skulls, but now something inside her whispered that this time would not end the same. Cade circled the creature, blade drawn, shield raised, but he did not charge. He waited, watching the machine man, noting the rhythm of its movement, the way its shoulders turned, the slight delay in its lower leg, the imbalance between left and right. He stepped forward again, testing a strike toward the leg, pulling back just before contact. The creature reacted as expected, fast, powerful, but predictable. Cade smiled, not with joy, but with knowledge. The next exchange came like thunder, blades clashing, fists flying, sand rising into thick clouds. The human used every piece of the ground, every piece of wind, every second of delay, not to overpower, but to outsmart. He ducked beneath a swing, drove his blade into the creature's hip, then jumped back before the counter could land. Again and again he struck, not to destroy, but to break balance, to weaken, to draw out mistakes. The creature began to falter, its strikes less sharp, its turns less smooth. Cade had turned the machine into something tired, something human, something that could fall with a final run. Cade leaped onto its back, driving his blade between the upper armor near the neck, holding tight as the creature twisted, screamed in silence, shook with rage and force, but Cade did not let go. He pulled the blade free with both hands, drove it deeper again and again, until the light in its eyes flickered, until the arm stopped moving, until the ground stopped shaking. The crowd erupted, voices rising, hands raised, not in shock, but in triumph. Cade stood over the fallen machine, his chest rising with short breaths, his body covered in dust and blood, but his eyes alive, his presence unchanged. Thyra stepped down from her seat, walking toward the arena, not waiting for permission, not caring for tradition. The guards let her pass. They too had seen enough to understand. She reached Cade, standing a few feet away, her voice quiet, yet strong. 3 trials survived. Your name will be carved into the walls of this place. Your victories will be told for years, but even now I ask you again. Will you leave without legacy? Will you vanish without seed? Will you let this strength die with you? Cade looked at her for a long time, the wind lifting his hair, the crowd fading into silence once more. He spoke, with a voice dry and tired, but filled with something real. You saw more than strength in me. You saw something worth keeping. Thyra nodded once, no pride in her eyes, only truth. And I offer not request, not order, only truth, from my blood to yours, from my honor to your legacy. Cade dropped his blade into the sand, turned his body to face her fully, his head tilted slightly, his eyes softer than before. Then we choose this together, not for pride, not for show, but because something in this fight is worth carrying forward. The twin suns pushed through the clouds above, the shadows faded, the arena bathed in golden fire. And the watchers stood not for the end of a fight, but for the beginning of something greater. Legacy had found its moment, and the hunter had found his reason. The final trial was not announced with horns or fire. The crowd had already changed. They no longer came only to see blood. They came to see what would happen next. They came to see the human, not as prey, not as a joke, but as a force of nature, a symbol of something old, something fierce, something real. Cade stood at the edge of the upper chamber, his hands resting near the edge of the steel rail below him. The arena waited, quiet like a beast before it strikes the sand smooth. The air heavy with heat, his chest rose and fell, but his breath was steady, his wounds dressed his blade, cleaned his spirit still unbroken. Beside him stood Thera, not in armor, not in silence, her presence strong, her voice calm, her eyes never leaving the empty ground below. She had spoken to her people, she had told them her decision, not for them to accept, not for them to question, but to hear and remember. She had chosen to bind legacy with the one who had faced the trials and left no doubts. Behind, across the chamber, the final challenger stood waiting, taller than most, older than most, a warrior who had won the prime trial 20 years before, now returned to test the one who had shaken the foundation of the entire system. This was no machine, no beast, no trick. This was a legend in flesh, and he had returned not for pride, but for truth. The gate opened. Cade stepped forward, his boots touching the sand again for the last time, not with nerves, not with fear, only with the quiet strength of someone who knew exactly why he had come. The elder warrior stepped forward, two eyes, narrow, body calm. The two faced each other under the open sky while thousands watched in silence. Not one sound, not one whisper. Then the horn rose, not loud, not sharp, just enough to break the stillness. They moved at the same time. The clash of metal against metal echoed across the walls, not like earlier fights. This was not wild, not brutal. This was clean, focused, every strike calculated, every block perfect. Two warriors not just fighting but understanding each other, step by step, motion by motion. They spoke in a language made of instincts and memories and unspoken rules. Cade moved low, turned, blocked, stepped back. The elder followed. Struck, dodged, feinted. Turned again. The battle flowed like a river, fast, strong, changing without warning. Neither showed weakness, neither lost ground. Both bled, both breathed hard. Both carried the weight of more than the fight. In the final moment, Cade saw the slight shift in the elder's left foot, a moment of slow movement, not from carelessness, but from time, from age, from the long years of holding power without challenge. He stepped forward, driving his blade not toward the heart, not toward the throat, but toward the ground, forcing the elder to stumble, using his own strength against him, pulling the weight downward, turning the final move into a controlled fall, not a kill, not a blow meant to destroy, but one that demanded respect. The elder landed on one knee, blade lowered, chest rising slowly, his head lifted, his eyes locked with Kadesh. Gave a small nod, then placed his blade on the ground, the gesture of acceptance, the signal of end. The crowd did not roar. They did not cheer. They stood slowly in silence, each one feeling the shift, the ending of one era, the beginning of something new. Thora stepped into the arena, her cloak trailing behind her, her hand resting on her chest. She stood before the human who had entered this place as an outsider, and now stood as more than champion. She spoke not in her language, not in code, not in ceremony, but in simple words. You fought with purpose. You stood when others fell. You saw beyond survival and became something greater. She placed a small emblem in his hand. Not made of gold, not made of silver, but carved from the bone of her ancestors, marked with symbols of legacy, of memory, of blood. This, you are no longer guest, no longer stranger. Cade looked at the emblem, his fingers closed around it slowly. Then he lifted his eyes toward her, and with this, you are no longer alone. The two stood in silence while the banners above changed, while the records rewrote themselves, while the stars watched without blinking. In the days that followed, stories spread across systems, not of just a fighter, not of just a trial, but of a human whose instincts could not be broken, whose strength was not just of the body, but of the will. Thyra and Cade returned not to fight again, but to teach, to guide, to ensure what had been forged would not fade. Some say their union created a new bloodline, one that carried both fire and stone, one that walked between stars and remembered both Earth and Ralvek as home. Others say they vanished into the deep systems, living not for glory, but for peace. But the story remained of the one who came from a forgotten world and stood against giants, of the one who carried no crown but wore legacy on his shoulders, of the one who made even the strongest whisper in awe. Such a hunter must reproduce such. A hunter did, and the galaxy was never the same again. The end.